I never cared about expensive clothes, fancy cars, or shining jewelry. Life had taught me long ago that people who look simple often carry the heaviest stories in their hearts. But my daughter-in-law, Rachel, never understood that. To her, appearance meant everything. Respect was measured by shoes, clothes, brands, and how loudly your money could speak. Mine didn't speak at all, and because of that, she never truly saw me, only what she wanted to see. My name is Evelyn Miller. I'm 63 years old. I raised my son, David, alone after my husband passed away when David was only 12. We weren't rich. We didn't own much beyond a small house, some quiet memories, and the dignity I had built over years of surviving life's storms. I worked at a local library for 28 years. My world was silent, peaceful, unnoticed, exactly the way I preferred. But life never tells you when it is planning to test your silence. When David met Rachel, I saw his eyes light up in a way I had never seen. She was everything he thought he wanted: modern, stylish, confident, elegant. She moved like someone born for attention. I didn't mind. After decades of living quietly, I had learned that the loudest shine often hides the deepest insecurities. I simply never expected that her insecurities would one day humiliate me. It began small. Rachel would glance at my clothes, smile politely, too politely, and say, "Ah, that's cute, very vintage." The words were sweet, but the tone carried something sharp. David never noticed. Men often love blindly, and sons especially. They believe their wives are incapable of cruelty. But life has a way of revealing truth slowly, like pages turning one by one. One afternoon, Rachel invited her friends home. They were all dressed elegantly, handbags worth more than my monthly pension dangling from their arms. I wasn't planning to join them. I had simply walked into the living room to take my empty teacup to the kitchen. As I stepped past them, the laughter quieted for half a second. That half-second silence, the kind that cuts deeper than words. One woman whispered, "Is that the maid?" Rachel smiled and replied, "No, that's my mother-in-law. She's simple. She doesn't really go out much." Everyone laughed softly, politely, painfully. I lowered my gaze and walked ahead. My hands didn't shake. Disappointment isn't weakness. That evening, I overheard Rachel telling David, "Your mom needs to dress better. It's embarrassing." David sighed but said nothing. His silence hurt more than Rachel's words. Silence is agreement in disguise. That night, in my small room, I looked at my neatly folded clothes. They were clean, comfortable, simple. And for the first time in years, I wondered if I truly appeared less to others. Then I remembered my husband once telling me, "Simplicity is not weakness, Evelyn. It is freedom." Rachel didn't know the truth behind my simplicity. She didn't know the sacrifices I had made. She didn't know the life I had quietly built. And she certainly didn't know that the land under our house, the land they lived on, still belonged entirely to me. 2 weeks passed. Little humiliations piled up like dust on a forgotten shelf. If I sat in the living room, she would put folded laundry beside me, her silent way of saying I didn't belong there. When her friends visited, she would say, "My mother-in-law is very traditional," as if it were a flaw. David never defended me, but I remained silent, not out of fear, but patience. Patience reveals people in a way anger never can. One day, Rachel's friends were chatting about a charity event. Rachel sighed dramatically and said, "I just wish David's family was more presentable." Her friends giggled. Rachel added, "She doesn't really understand these things." She didn't whisper. She didn't hide it. That confidence, that belief that I was beneath her, that was what made it hurt. That night I made a decision. Not revenge. Not anger. Something far more powerful. I decided to remind both Rachel and David who I really was and what I had built quietly over decades. The next morning they were discussing renovations, new floors, new kitchen, backyard deck. David called the bank confidently, but when he hung up, his face had gone pale. "We were denied," he whispered. Rachel snapped, "What do you mean denied? Our credit is great." David didn't understand, so he went to the bank in person. When he returned, there was confusion written all over his face. "Mom," he said slowly, "the bank told me something. The land this house is built on, it still belongs to you." Rachel froze. The color drained from her face. "What?" I looked at her calmly. "I never transferred the land," I said softly. "The house is in your name, but the land belongs to me. Without my signature, no bank can approve any loan." Rachel's mouth opened, but no words came out. "Why didn't you tell us?" "You never asked," I said. "You assumed." That single sentence, it sat heavily in the room, because assumptions had been her biggest habit. She had assumed I was poor, assumed I was uneducated, assumed I had no value, assumed she was above me. People destroy relationships with assumptions, not truths. Rachel sank into a chair. Her voice cracked for the first time. "I didn't know." "I know," I replied gently. "You judged me by my bag, by my shoes, by my quiet life. But simplicity is not poverty, Rachel, and wealth is not character." For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. She didn't have a smile. She didn't have confidence. She had silence, the same silence she used to give me. David sat down heavily, burying his face in his hands. Not angry, not confused, ashamed. That shame was not mine to carry, it was theirs. The days that followed were different. Not magically different, but slowly, softly. Rachel began helping me in the kitchen. She asked me questions. She listened. She tried. Trying matters. Trying is the first sign of growth. One evening, I told them the truth, something I had never said aloud. After my husband died, I had saved every dollar, every penny. I worked extra hours at the library, took freelance typing work at night, walked instead of taking the bus. And slowly, over years, I bought the land. Not for power, not for pride, for David's future. I never told them, because love doesn't demand attention. Love builds quietly. Rachel cried when she heard it. Truly cried, not out of guilt alone, but realization. Realization that she had built her judgments on nothing but fabric and brands. She whispered, "I am so sorry. I misjudged you." I nodded. Forgiveness doesn't erase pain, but it opens the door to growth. Weeks turned into months. Rachel changed, not completely, but consistently. She stopped commenting on my clothes. She offered to help with chores. She asked about my past. She even said she wanted to learn the recipes I used to cook for David when he was young. One afternoon, David sat beside me on the couch. He said softly, "Mom, I should have defended you. I failed you." I held his hand and said, "Life teaches us through silence, not noise." He cried, not loudly but deeply. Healing doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes healing is simply a quiet moment shared with someone who finally understands your worth. Slowly, Rachel and I learned each other. She confessed that her obsession with appearances came from her own insecurities. Her parents always judged her based on perfection. Perfect clothes, perfect behavior, perfect looks. She grew up believing value comes from what you wear, not who you are. And now she was learning something entirely new. I didn't hate her. I never had. I pitted her. a woman raised to believe that love must shine to be real, when in truth, real love is invisible, soft, quiet, steady. Over time, Rachel started spending evenings with me, not out of obligation, but comfort. She asked about my childhood, my struggles, my marriage. She laughed at stories of David's mischief. She listened when I shared lessons life had taught me. And one night, she held my hand gently and said, "I misjudged you because I never learned to look beyond appearances. You taught me dignity." I didn't respond. Some lessons don't need words. Some lessons speak through time. One morning, she surprised me by wearing a simple dress, minimal makeup, and a soft smile. "Do I look okay?" she asked. For the first time, she asked, not assumed. "You look like yourself," I said. That was the highest compliment I could ever give. David noticed the change too. He and Rachel argued less. They laughed more. They began asking me to join meals, outings, conversations. People don't change through force. People change when you give them space to see their own reflection. And Rachel had finally seen her months later. During a family dinner, Rachel raised a toast. Her voice trembled slightly as she said, "I want to thank Evelyn, not just for the home we live in, but for teaching me what a real home looks like." Her friends, yes, the same friends who once mocked me, were now quieter, more respectful. They didn't look at me with judgment. They looked at me with curiosity. Life has strange ways of turning circles. The same people who mock you often end up learning from you. I still never transferred the land. Not out of spite, never out of spite, but because some things must remain as reminders. Reminders of dignity. Reminders of boundaries. Reminders of worth. And Rachel understood that. She never asked again. Instead, she worked to earn something far more valuable than land, my respect. And she did. With time, she truly did. Today, I still wear my old comfortable clothes. I still carry my old handbag. I still live simply, not because I cannot afford more, but because I no longer explain myself to people who measure worth by appearance. Rachel now tells her friends, "My mother-in-law is the strongest woman I know. She taught me dignity." David visits me every morning before work. He hugs me longer than he used to. Life teaches us in unexpected ways. Sometimes people underestimate you. Sometimes they humiliate you. Sometimes they silence you. But silence is not defeat. Silence is power. The quiet kind. The kind that grows slowly and reveals truth gently, like sunlight after a long night. People eventually learn who you are, not from your clothes, not from your possessions, but from your strength. And true strength never needs to shout. True strength whispers, "I know who I am." And one day you will too.